Hey y'all, do you want to play the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves characters as Pathfinder characters? Fear no more! One of my subscribers and Pathfinder friends, Shades Corvid, created character sheets in Pathfinder for each of the main characters of the series, and Hugh Grant's character. Before we start, there will be a spoiler warning for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now and come back after you've seen the movie. Alright, let's begin. Edgin Darvis. Edgin is one of the main characters of the movie. He is listed here as a male human bard at level 5. He's a chaotic good human with a heritage of versatile heritage. Versatile heritage in Pathfinder is kind of the equivalent of variant human in Dungeons & Dragons. It gives you one general feat for which you have the prerequisites for. You can select this feat at any point during character creation, so you don't have to pick it at the beginning or at the end. You can pick it whenever, and that means you have a whole lot more access to a whole lot more feats. His background is detective, and this makes sense given that he was with the Harpers and that they're kind of a secretive group that just tries to prevent evil from kind of taking over the place. He gets 2 ability boosts trained in the Society skill, Underworld lore skill, and the Streetwise skill feat. We'll talk about Streetwise here when we get to the feats, which are over here. We have Perception of 12, which is a pretty decent perception. They have Common, Dwarven, Elven, Halfling, and these skills are basically your standard skills for what you would expect. So he's got an Acrobatics of 10, Athletics 8, which makes sense. He's not necessarily the strongest character, but he can be good on his feet. Deception and Diplomacy make a lot of sense, especially given that he was a Harper. Harpers are spies. A diplomacy check would be the check that he made at the beginning of the movie, trying to argue his case about getting freedom. You can also argue that's a deception, but I would actually say diplomacy in that case. He also could use it as performance. It makes sense that he would have a high performance skill. He sings a lot in the movie. There are multiple points where he plays on his lute, and it makes complete sense that he would have performance. Stealth and thievery, he has to have those somewhat high because he did go from being a Harper who was a spy to a thief. Dexterity and wisdom being high make a lot of sense as well. Charisma, that's the main stat for bards, so that being 18 makes a lot of sense. He also has a studded leather armor, which is not actually wearing leather armor per se, but I get why you want to have that because you're a bard. He also gets a striking battle lute. There actually is a battle lute in Pathfinder. The battle lute is a reinforced lute suitable for both use as a handheld musical instrument and for bashing heads should a crowd turn sour. Its strings are finely braided wires that run along a sturdy metal neck. You can shove with it. You have a 2-handed 1d8, so if you use it with both hands, you get 1d8 of damage. So here's the thing with the lute. It can be used 2-handed or 1-handed. If it's used 1-handed, it's a 1d4. But if you use it 2-handed, all of the damage dice gets changed to a 1d8, and that also applies to the striking rune. Striking gives you 1 extra damage die, which means that when he attacks with this particular lute, that means that he'll hit with a 1d4 twice or a 1d8 if he uses it with both hands. He also has a short sword and a purse. He has an AC of 23, and if you're from the D&D world, that is really high. For Pathfinder, that's pretty standard for this level. He also has a plus 12 to reflex, a plus 12 to will, and a plus 7 to fortitude. He also gets a plus 1 circumstance bonus versus auditory, illusion, linguistics, sonic, or visual effects. He has an HP of 48, as we can see here. He's got a speed of 25. 25 is your average speed for players in Pathfinder. So in D&D it's 30, in Pathfinder it's 25. He also gets occult bard spells with a DC of 21 and a plus 11 to attack. Bard spells are part of the occult tree. His spells include 2 3rd-level spells, 3 2nd-level spells, 3 1st-level spells, and cantrips set at 3rd level. So in Pathfinder, cantrips scale at certain levels, and because he has cantrips at 3rd level, that means some of them do scale. He also gets focus points, which we'll discuss here in a moment, and he also has focus spells, which are known as specialty spells. So his first spell is going to be Clairaudience. Clairaudience allows you to spy on people audibly. So you can basically create a little ear and you can just kind of listen to them. It gives you extra hearing that's at range, and the range is 500 feet. He also gets the spell Enthrall. With Enthrall, you speak or sing without interruption through the casting and duration. Targets who notice your speech or song might give their undivided attention. Each target must make a will save. The GM might grant a circumstance bonus up to a maximum of +4 if the target is an opposing religion, ancestry, or political leaning, or is otherwise unlikely to agree with what you're saying. When they fail their save, they are fascinated with you. On a critical failure, they can't attempt a save to end the fascination. Level 2 spells include Blistering Invective. Basically, you're just insulting somebody. It's a much better vicious mockery. You deal 2d6 persistent fire damage, and the target has to make a will save. You could literally look it in the eye and try and do this without your language language, but the other creature would get a +4 circumstance bonus. If you're not familiar with circumstance bonuses, they're bonuses that you get in that particular situation. It's kind of like when your DM kind of goes, okay, roll advantage. In Pathfinder, you say you get a circumstance bonus. On a failure, the target becomes frightened of you, which is fantastic. It basically just means that you've given it such a nice burn that it doesn't want to hear your insults anymore. He also gets the spell Knock. Knock grants a +4 status bonus to any creature that tries to open the target door, lock, or container with an athletics or thievery check. Basically, it makes it easier for you to use your thieves tools to open doors. It also counteracts the spell Lock. Lock is literally the opposite of Knock. He also gets telekinetic maneuver, a 2nd level spell. He allows him to move a foe or something that they're carrying. He can attempt to disarm, shove, or trip the target with this. Then he gets Charm. Charm is essentially the same as Enthrall, but it has a different effect. And the effect is that instead of them being fascinated by you, they're just friendly towards you. For 1st level spells, he has Illusory Disguise. Illusory Disguise is Pathfinder's version of Disguise Self. And you can do what's called heightening the spell, which means casting it at a higher level, and it gives you other traits, such as it disguises your voice and your scent. So if you cast it at higher levels, you don't hear your voice. Like, let's say you have a feminine voice and you're trying to be a more masculine creature. Heightening the spell will allow your voice to be masked as well, so you don't have to worry about changing your voice. He also gets the 1st level spell Soothe. You regain 1d4 plus 10 hit points when they cast the spell, and a +2 status bonus to saves against mental effects for the duration. So it's both a heal and it's also a buff. Some of you D&D people, when you see the word True Strike, are going to die. But True Strike in Pathfinder is actually really good. It is a 1st level spell, and essentially what it does is it lets you take the next attack roll that you use in your turn and get literal advantage on it. You get to roll your die twice and keep the better of the two. This is one of the few times I've seen where you genuinely get advantage, as we would put it in Dungeons and Dragons, in Pathfinder. It's actually a really good spell. The first of the cantrips he gets is Daze. Daze allows him to deal damage equal to his spellcasting ability modifier, which is 4. It's a flat amount of damage, and the target must make a will save. So if he hits with Daze, then he basically gets a flat amount of damage, and he can potentially stun the target if they critically fail. Now, you're seeing things like fail and critically fail. In Pathfinder, they have a different way of ruling successes and failures. They have a tiered system. So you can have a critical success, a regular success, a fail, and a critical fail. And that allows for a lot of versatility in things that can happen. So let's say in order to critically succeed or fail, you have to be either 10 points above or 10 points below what the DC or the number you need to hit is. So in this case, if they critically fail, which remember, his save is a 21. If they roll below an 11, they will critically fail. And with Daze, if they critically fail, they are also stunned 1. I'm not going to go into status effects too much, just know that status effects can stack, and that's what the number on the end means. If you've ever played MMOs, you know exactly what I mean. Ghost Sound. Ghost Sound creates an auditory illusion of simple sounds that has a maximum volume equal to 4 normal humans shouting. It emanates from a square that you designate within a range, and you can't create intelligible words. It's basically just there to kind of distract people. It's like prestidigitation. He also has Guidance. Guidance is a little different in comparison to D&D. In D&D, you add a 1d4 to any skill checks. With Guidance, the target gets a +1 status bonus to 1 attack roll, perception check, saving throw, or skill check. Basically a +1 status bonus to pretty much anything. They can choose when to use the roll, and it lasts for the duration being until the start of your next turn. That target can choose which roll to use it on, and once they use the roll, the spell ends. And regardless of the result, the target is temporarily immune from Guidance for 1 hour. It makes it so that Guidance can't be spammed like it is in D&D. Infectious Enthusiasm is another cantrip that he has. He gains a +1 status bonus to his choice of attack rolls, will saves, or charisma-based skill checks. And during that spell's duration, an ally who's observing you casting the spell and was within 30 feet of you when you did so can take a single action, which has the Concentrate trait, to gain the same bonuses you chose until the start of its next turn. Basically, this allows you to potentially have a +1 status bonus for you on attack rolls, will saves, and charisma-based checks, and someone else. Light. Put a light on an object. It's very much like D&D. Message. With Message, you actually have to mouth the words quietly, so instead of having that little copper wire, you actually kind of like hide your mouth and kind of muffle the words, and it goes into that creature's mind. It's a range of 120 feet, and you have to be able to see them. Shield is actually a cantrip in Pathfinder. It gives you a +1 circumstance bonus to AC until the start of your next turn, which is the equivalent of raising the shield action, but it doesn't require a hand to use. So you get a +1 to your AC, which is fantastic. You also can use the shield block reaction with this shield. The shield block reaction allows you to prevent an amount of damage equal to the shield's hardness. In this case, it's 5. So you can use the shield block reaction to reduce your damage by 5. And after you use the shield block, the spell ends and you can't cast it again for 10 minutes. It's a fantastic cantrip, but they have to have that time limit. Otherwise, again, like Guidance, it would totally be spammed. And in this case, this is is where we see that heightened. See how it says heightened third? That means that the shield has a hardness of 10. Counter performance. Now we're getting into the focus spells. So if you look here, you'll see that it says focus spell, 1 focus point, and a DC of 21. Some spellcasting classes get focus spells. So the difference between focus spells and regular spells is that focus spells require focus points. You cannot use a spell slot to cast a focus spell, and you cannot use focus points to cast spells normally from spell slots. These spells are considered your specialty spells, and for bards, they are counter performance and inspire courage. So counter performance is where your performance protects you and your allies, and you roll a performance check for a type you know, and auditory performance if the trigger is auditory, and a visual one if it's a visual trigger. And you and the allies in the area can use the better result between your performance check and the saving throw. So basically, you can use your performance check to potentially negate a really, really bad roll. So let's say you have your party member, they're trying to pass a save, and that save is low. You can actually use your reaction to use counter performance and go, okay, let's say you rolled a 5. Let me do a performance check. And given that he's got a performance of plus 13, that will make it almost impossible for you to fail. You'd have to fail with a 1, which is a critical failure, and that would automatically go from a success to a fail, at least in most cases. They have another cantrip called Inspire Courage, and he inspires his allies with words of tunes or encouragement, and he and his allies in the area gain a +1 status bonus to all attack rolls, damage rolls, and saves against fear effects. This is something I can absolutely see Edgin doing. In fact, the fact that he could play his little lute and do that makes complete sense. Now we move on to feats. So Pathfinder is very feat heavy. So instead of getting a whole bunch of class skills that are tied to subclasses and classes, you can pick feats. You get Ancestry Feats, which are tied to your ancestry. In this case, it's human. You can also get Class Feats, which are tied to your class. You get General Feats, which anybody can get. You get Skill Feats, which are tied to your skills and whether you're an expert or not. So the first Ancestry feat that he picked up was Clever Improviser. He's a constant planner. In fact, that he calls himself a planner. It is a level 5 feat, so he gets it at level 5, and he's learned to handle situations, and he gains the Untrained Improvisation General feat. In addition, you can attempt a skill action that normally requires you to be trained even if you are untrained, which is great. The difference between untrained and trained is a +2, so that's big. That is a lot. And just to skip ahead a bit, Untrained Improvisation basically allows you to take your proficiency bonus to an untrained skill check equal to half your level instead of +0. Think of Jack of all trades. He also has the Ancestry feat Natural Ambition, which is limited to humans, and it basically allows you to gain a first level class feat of your class. So instead of getting another Ancestry feat, you get another class feat. And his class feats include Bardic Lore, which basically allows him to use Recall Knowledge on Bard checks specifically. Cantrip Expansion allows him to have 2 additional cantrips from his spell list into his repertoire, so it gives him more cantrips. He also gets Melodious Spell. Melodious Spell basically lets you deceive someone, and you have to roll a performance check against an observer's perception DC. If you succeed in your performance check, then you can cast a spell without people realizing that you're casting a spell. It's very clever, and I quite like it. Well Versed allows him to gain a +1 circumstance bonus to auditory, illusion, linguistic, sonic, or visual traits. And then we move on to general feats. With general feats, he has Prescient Planner. Again, makes sense, he is a planner. And he regularly creates convoluted plans and contingencies, using his resources to enact them. You take 1 minute to remove your backpack, then carefully remove an item you hadn't previously declared that you purchased. You intuited that you would come to need said item and purchased it at the latest opportunity. The item must be a piece of adventuring gear and cannot be a weapon, armor, alchemical item, magical item, or other treasure. It must be common with a level no higher than half your level, and its bulk must be low enough that carrying it would not have made you encumbered. This is quite literally, hey, I have an item for this. For his skill feats, we have Concealing Ledgermane. Rather than hide an object somewhere the inspectors won't search, you're skilled at keeping the object on the move so it's never where they look. When you conceal an object of light bulk or less, you can use Thievery instead of the Stealth for your checks and for the DC of an active searcher's perception check. Basically, it allows you to switch between Thievery and Stealth. He also gets Pickpocket. Basically allows him to steal an object without the -5 penalty. You can't steal objects that are very obvious. You have to be smart about this. And if you're a master in Thievery, master is one of the tiers of training, you can attempt a steal from a creature in combat or otherwise on guard. When doing so, stealing requires 2 manipulate actions instead of 1, and he takes a -5 status penalty. Streetwise. Streetwise is about living on the streets. He can use his society modifier instead of his diplomacy modifier to gather information. Given that his society is only a +9 and not a +13, I can't see that being used very often. Subtle theft. When you successfully steal something, observers take a -2 circumstance penalties to their perception DCs to detect your theft. They have disadvantage on being able to see him. And if you use create diversion using deception, you can take a single palm an object or steal action that doesn't end your undetected condition. So basically you can create a diversion and steal from someone without ending that diversion. As you can see, many of the non-class feats are trying to make him better at thievery, while most of the class feats and most of the class spells are about illusions, which tracks. He doesn't come off as a lore bard bard as I would see it. This is not a lore bard, he's an enigma bard. But lore bards in D&D come off as the people that sing a lot or perform a lot and cast a lot of magical spells. He does not do that. He fights hand in hand with that short sword and his striking lute. This is a great build. It makes a lot of sense. It's very thematic, and this would be a great character to play. So that was Edgin. Thank you for watching. Check out the PDF for the character down in the description. Next up's going to be Holga. I hope to see you next time. May your day be fabulous and fierce.